Okay, so let me just talk. I'm not going to talk about David Bowie because I did a full hour and a half on him. Black Star, huge influence on me, my music. I've covered him, covered the entire Black Star album. I've done tribute live show. I've done, like I said, the Black Star album, tribute albums, if you will. I'm teaching a seminar on David Bowie in the fall. So he's a huge influence. I don't want to talk about Bowie now because that was a separate talk, and I want to talk about other artists who have influenced me. And I mentioned at the beginning, like when I was in high school, junior high school, the Police and Rush and progressive rock, King Crimson led me to David Bowie, actually. Robert Fripp and his playing on Heroes and also Scary Monsters. But apart from Bowie, I want to talk, and not mainly, but one other sort of major influence that I'd like to first discuss, another solo artist, really, not a band, right? Jeff Buckley from, America. He's also like me, right? He's from the U.S., was from the U.S. He died very young, unfortunately, if you know his story, at the age of 30. He was a Led Zeppelin fan, too. He jumped in the water singing, apparently, I think it was A Whole Lot of Love or Rock and Roll or something. And he never came back, and it's a really tragic, kind of mysterious story. It apparently wasn't a suicide, but anyway. Jeff Buckley, it was thanks to one of my bandmates, one of the people that I ended up, falling out with him, but that I learned of Jeff Buckley and quickly became enamored with his music, his voice, guitar playing, but his voice, singing style, guitar playing style. I can't say my guitar playing style in particular is influenced by him because I'm not that good, actually. He used the Telecaster. My electric is a Telecaster. My main guitar is actually this Ibanez acoustic. But I do have a Telecaster, and that was because of Jeff Buckley. But the singing style and the emotive singing style and what we would call the uragoe in Japanese, the head voice, this kind of, very high voice he puts, and I can go higher, but I'm in the apartment, I'm not going to do that. But in my first band, it was rock band. I couldn't hear my vocals. I was like screaming all the time, And I actually took voice lessons for the second time to learn how to scream properly and not hurt my voice because I kept hurting my vocal cords. But with Jeff Buckley, it was like, he could scream, but it had power behind it from here, But it was like mixed voice, I guess you could say, head voice or mixed voice, right? I learned this technique, and partly I learned it by myself, not just from the lessons, but through listening to Jeff Buckley and just experimenting and singing kind of like that, and develop my own style of singing that is influenced by that, just like, for example, Tom York from Radiohead is said to be, right? He uses a lot of falsetto or head voice, real high voice, but not full voice, right? But I also sometimes do sing with a bit of more power, or a very quiet, and I've covered Hallelujah, and I mentioned I was learning that from a long time ago, and my version of Hallelujah now, the end has a long tone that I do, and it's definitely an influence of Jeff Buckley. I do it in my own way, I'm not imitating him, but definitely influence. Jeff Buckley, of course everybody knows, who knows Jeff Buckley, knows Grace, knows the album Grace, knows Hallelujah, the cover that he made famous, the Leonard Cohen version that Jeff Buckley does. Jeff Buckley also, like me, actually, in a way, he did a lot of cover songs. I've done a lot of cover songs, and he made them his own. And I always try to make covers my own. The difference is most of my covers are on the keyboard because it's easier for me to cover using a keyboard with my ears. My guitar playing is not that good, right? Jeff Buckley, like Calling You, right? I did Calling You too. And I think my vocal style is perhaps influenced by Buckley, but it's a piano, right? Jeff Buckley did an arpeggio, Calling You. It's beautiful. It's great. And I Know It's Over by the Smiths, and he did that, and he did, what is the other one I really like? Satisfied Mind, I love that. And his solo original work is also beautiful. I mean, it's great. Grace, the stuff on Grace, and some of the power rock songs, which are also, power rock isn't the word. I mean, it's, at times it's, right, it gets real intense, and he even screams and stuff. But then, at at times it gets just quiet, and I love that, the merihari, Japanese. My music has that too, the change, it's quiet and then it explodes, right? Nine Inch Nails does that, or did that, like with the downward spiral. That was one thing I love. I could talk about Nine Inch Nails, so I should. And then it explodes. I love that. So that from Jeff Buckley from Nine Inch Nails too, actually. But Nine Inch Nails is a different story. That's electronic music. So yeah, I'm a huge Jeff Buckley fan. And then later, of course, there's the Outtakes album the demo album that was released posthumously, that he was going to record, I guess, all of those songs from My Sweetheart, The Drunk. So it's like sketches for or something, right? But I've listened to basically everything I can, that and lots of live albums that are available, or videos on YouTube, whatever. I love Jeff Buckley, and I covered You and I. I did You and I, which is based on the version on the sketches for My Sweetheart. And it's electronic, because that version, it's like a drone and just him singing. So I did a drone using, my keyboard and Logic, and I put some other sounds in and stuff, and made it my own. And the singing style is my own, but it's definitely influenced by him, and I changed lyrics a bit too. But it's basically You and I. Jeff Buckley, never got to see him, unfortunately, because I became a fan after I came to Japan. It was the 90s were well over. He was gone. Okay. Next, let me talk about Nine Inch Nails, I think, because, I need to do. Nine Inch Nails, I mentioned this before. David Bowie, 1995, Outside. 1994 was the Downward Spiral. Bowie toured with Nine Inch Nails, and that's how I learned Nine Inch Nails. I was living in Japan for the first time as a student, study abroad. Student, I was young, in my 20s, and Nine Inch Nails were actually already very popular. I had heard them and kind of liked some of this stuff, but I hadn't yet kind of dug my teeth in. Actually, the song I had been introduced to was from Pretty Hate Machine, not from the Downward Spiral. But then I became a big fan, and then, like I said, from there, Coil and these other kind of undergroundish, Skinny Puppy and these other industrial artists became part of my dining, what's the word I want to use? My diet, right? And that led to, right, working with James. His band was Thread. He was solo but Thread, right, as a drummer, and then later now doing my own electronic stuff. And so Nine Inch Nails, yeah, and not just the Downward Spiral. I mean, I just remained a fan. Throughout the years, I still follow Trent Reznor's career in music, and of course, he's very strongly connected with Bowie, and he remixed Bowie. They did I'm Afraid of Americans together, the video and the remix. They toured together in 1995, yeah, that's right. I didn't get to see it because I had to leave Japan. No, I was in Japan when that was touring in America, right? And so yeah, Nine Inch Nails and electronic stuff. I won't talk again at super length about this. I'm going to keep this segment a bit short, I think, but I respect him, and also his recent music, soundtrack music, and kind of dark ambient stuff is also really great. And if you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. Very different from Closer and 90s Nine Inch Nails kind of thing. And of course, he also over the years has changed. Even Nine Inch Nails has certainly morphed into something, progressed into something quite different than it was. And it's interesting. It's good. I like Nine Inch Nails. Next, I think I will talk about then. Should I do this? I was going to talk about Sakamoto Ryuichi, right? Yeah, let me just mention Sakamoto Ryuichi and David Sylvian. Because they're two different artists, right? But they're also friends. They've collaborated. Sakamoto, obviously, Japanese piano player, artist, and he does electronic music too. He does classical or neoclassical, original stuff mostly. I mean, he's conducted orchestra and stuff. He's a brilliant guy. I think he's actually basically a genius. Actually, I think all these musicians are genius. Bowie and Jeff Buckley, Trent Reznor, and certainly Sakamoto Ryuichi. He's called the kind of Professor Sakamoto in Japan, right? Because he's a smart guy. He gives the kind of talks like this, except they're more, about like music theory, whatever. He's a really smart, brilliant guy. Anyway, I've seen him live about 4 times. I saw Bowie live 4 times. Never saw Jeff Buckley. I saw 9 Inch Nails only once, but it was good. And so Sakamoto and David Sylvian. David Sylvian I actually discovered through Robert Fripp, just as I basically got into Bowie through Robert Fripp, because they did a collaboration, Sylvian Fripp. It doesn't sound like Sylvian. It sounds like sort of like King Crimson, but not, because Sylvian's vocals are Sylvian, you know, and they're kind of, you know, dark, deep, romantic vibrato and stuff, and very different from King Crimson, basically, you know, different from like Adrian Belew singing style other people have sung with Crimson, and then I love that. I mean, it's great, the Sylvian Fripp, but then I discovered David Sylvian's music, and which I love, and that, of course, he got very, very experimental over the years. Like Scott Walker, there's another artist I could talk about at length. I don't have so much time right now, but so Sakamoto Ryuichi and David Sylvian, they collaborated on, you know, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is maybe Sakamoto's most famous piece ever. I actually covered that myself. It's not great piano, but it's, you know. And there's a vocal version. My version actually doesn't have the lyrics, voice, and that version is sung by David Sylvian, Forbidden Colors. And then later they did World Citizen together. So, and they're friends. And here's a cool story. I went to see Sakamoto Ryuichi live. I saw him live. Most of the times I saw him in Japan, but I saw him live in Boston once when I was living in Providence, studying at Brown. And I went to Boston to see him. They're friends, right? And after the show, I realized that David Sylvian was standing right in front of me, and another guy was talking his ear off. And Sylvian looked shell-shocked. His face was kind of pasty white. I think he's kind of a private, shy guy, you know. And I wanted to talk to him, but I thought, I'm not going to, you know, bombard him after he's just been bombarded by this other guy who looked like he was ready to run away. So I didn't say anything to him, but he was standing right in front of me. And then he left and went to see his buddy Sakamoto backstage, apparently. I've never seen Sylvian live. That's a shame. I've wanted to. He's been to Japan, but the timing, I just missed him every time. But I've seen Sakamoto. So yeah, David Sylvian. I mentioned Scott Walker, another huge one, also related to the Bowie, right? They were friends. Bowie was a Walker fan. Bowie covered Walker. He did Night Flights, Black Tie White Noise, and he did the Jacques Brel stuff early on, which was like having heard, I think, Scott Walker's English versions, right? Jacques Brel, like My Death. My Death is one of my all-time favorites, the Bowie version, actually. But I like the Scott Walker version of Night Flights better than the Bowie version. Interesting. So, and that was, of course, you know, Scott Walker's original song, and Bowie did a cover. Scott Walker also, like, shares with David Sylvian the penchant for experimentation, and he also, over the years, has gotten more and more kind of experimental, or had, I should say, he passed on, unfortunately, after Bowie. Yeah, so Scott Walker, you know, I was into his early stuff, like the solo Scott Walker stuff, and of course, like what he did with the Walker Brothers with the Night Flights album, which is unique, and then the albums he did after that, which became progressively more experimental and, you know, had influenced, for example, Bowie and Eno in the 70s and stuff. And then after I came back from Japan, I was living in Hiroshima for a couple of years. I came back to study eventually at Brown, and before that, after I came back, the Drift had come out, and I had been listening to Tilt from the 90s and liked it, and so I just, you know, followed on from there. So I like and I respect Scott Walker as well. And he also was influenced by 9 Inch Nails. Actually, his later stuff, his kind of heavier, darker stuff. It's all kind of interlinked, isn't it? And I'm actually, you know, I'm shooting for a shorter video right now. I might do a longer one sometime about the influences, but I'm going to end now, the next maybe 5 minutes or so, with the most recent discovery of mine. In terms of, I mean, I like tons of artists I could talk about. I mentioned Tom York, Radiohead. I love Radiohead. Lots and lots and lots of artists, obviously, but and not just rock or electronic or whatever. I listen to all genres. I listen to Indian classical music. I like all sorts of stuff. Zakir Hussain, the tabla player, is like kind of an idol of mine, you know. But I'm going to talk about IAMX. This guy Chris Corner. He was in the Sneaker Pimps. Sneaker Pimps have a new album this year with him, and he's kind of doing both now. You know, he did like an IAMX remix of Sneaker Pimp's recent song recently on a single that just came out the other day. But IAMX, basically, I'm not more IAMX side than the Sneaker Pimp side for me. Recently, some months ago, discovered IAMX just by shuffling on Apple Music, actually, and I think it was linked to Placebo, another band that I like. I sometimes listen to. They, for some reason, when I played Placebo, IAMX kept coming up, and I was like, this is kind of cool. And I started listening to the IAMX albums and really, 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 really like them. And makes sense, right? Because I like Nine Inch Nails and I like Gary Newman. I haven't talked about him, right? Linked. Gary Newman is friends with the IAMX guy. And also Kevin Key from Skinny Puppy, another band, major influence on me. In the 90s, I started listening to them. So recently, I've really, really been into IAMX and everything through the very last thing he put out. Well, actually, the last thing I think was Echo, which is like the acoustic versions. He's very much like me in some ways. I don't think personality-wise he is. I don't think at all. But in terms of his kind of stance, or he's basically, right? He was in a band and he's still connected with them. That's different. But he's a kind of went solo, and right, he does the electronic stuff, keyboard stuff, electronics beats and stuff, and then plays the acoustic. He's actually a really good guitar player, and he has a high-pitched, emotive voice, which if you listen to my music, you might see some connection there. His voice, I think, is maybe higher than mine. And I just really like IAMX stuff a lot. I listen to it a lot. All the stuff I've really gone through. And, not all the albums are on the streaming music services, so I've purchased the ones that aren't, and I use the streaming. I listen to the other stuff. And I covered Wildest Wind from Metanoia, the last track on that album. And I released it earlier this year. I did a video for it, too. Not going to talk about the video, but I love Wildest Wind. It's kind of like a sad, beautiful electronic piano ballad love song or something. I just really like it, And so I did my own version of that. I did actually two versions. Two mixes. One with more drums, like the original, and one with less, with strings, programmed strings. And so yeah, he's like my most recent sort of discovery, I guess. I mean, there's others, but IAMX is a big one. I listen to IAMX a lot these days, and really, really like what he did. Everything is Burning, the addendum to Metanoia. I got that a couple months ago now, and it's great, It's all good stuff. And he's got a new thing coming out, so looking forward to that too. I think it's an in-studio thing, maybe because of Corona.